Boomer and Gio.
BT and Sal.
Kevin and Tiki.
Keith McPherson, your nighttime host on The Fan.
On the fan.
On the fan.
On the fan.
It's WFAN Daily, hosted by Pete Hoffman.
Welcome to another episode of WFAN Daily, and hockey season is here already. It's unbelievable. It just feels like we were there not too long ago as the Rangers were getting eliminated, not even getting into the playoffs. But we're going to talk about the regular season, the puck dropping tonight at 8 o'clock at MSG versus the Penguins. And joining us right now to talk about this, a very good friend of mine. You could see him on SNY. You hear him all the time on WFAN. Chris Lopresti. CeeLo, what's going on, bud?
Hey, bud. Yes, you've got your Rangers jersey on. I'm in my son's room. So we've got Henrik Lundqvist on the wall over here. We've got the Mika Fathead. So, we're ready to go. Interesting you say it feels like just yesterday the season ended. I've been waiting months for this, man. I've gotten used to the playoffs. So the regular season ending for them and whatever it was, second week of April, it's almost 6 months. I'm ready for some hockey. Let's go.
So take me through this, because right now this was a crazy offseason as far as getting rid of a captain, well, not a captain, but a leader on the ice, off the ice, whatever, Chris Kreider, changing coaches again. We bring in Mike Sullivan. Take me through just this offseason and how we've progressed to get to this point, to the opening night.
Well, I think there were some much needed changes. I think most people saw the writing on the wall as far as Chris Kreider goes, dating all the way back to when Chris Drury put that memo out with him and Trouba, whatever that was, last November, maybe it was even October, basically almost a year now. So this is a combination of, I think, the team needing a bit of a refresh and also salary cap situations. They're locked into some pretty big money long-term deals. Certainly the case with JT Miller when they brought him back, with his contract almost matching where Mika Zibanejad is at in terms of length and dollars as well. So will Chris Kreider be missed at times? I'm sure he will. You hate to see sort of the end of an era for a homegrown guy come to an end. But I'm cautiously optimistic and at least excited that this year will look a little bit different than last season did, which, the bar is set pretty low. It was a pretty much disastrous season with very few exceptions along the way. A couple of little spots where you thought maybe they'd get it together, find their way into the playoffs. So I am up on the changes that they made. I like that they were able to go out and get Gavrikov in free agency, which should help stabilize Adam Fox and let him get back to what he does best, which is obviously the puck on his stick and making plays offensively at even strength, certainly on the power play. But the rest of the defense, I have some question marks about. That's really what it comes down to me. I am cautiously optimistic, but I'm going to go up and down the roster. Both new guys that they acquired last year, the blend, the mix, new head coach, new systems. There are certainly questions that they're going to have to answer early on in the season. Right now, it's really hard for me to have a good feel what this team's going to look like, but hard to imagine that it's going to look any worse than it did for most of last year.
Well, it's weird because last year at the trade deadline, there were, I think, a few moves that were made, and nothing was very sexy, and nothing was very over the top. This even the same this couple of years ago where they did make the playoffs. I don't feel like this team has gotten that much better. I feel like they still have some veteran pieces. JT Miller's here; he's now named the captain, but I don't really get this feel like that was the way to go, was to keep these veteran pieces. I'm almost like, you showed Mika before. I feel like they're too old now, some of these guys, and I feel like those players are kind of outdid themselves. They made their runs, and it was time to move on and get younger.
Some of them are getting up there in age, or certainly heading towards the back nine of their career, or over the plateau of their prime years. But certain contracts, because of the way that Chris Drury and past regimes structured them and the no movement, no trade clauses they've handed out, we talk about Mika. It's easy to say, well, they should have went and forced their hand and essentially, treated him the same way they did Jacob Trouba. But it's a little different in that, there was some flexibility with where they were able to go with Trouba and where they were able to move him. Whereas Mika has full say, and he's spoken about it publicly that, he feels he earned that clause, no movement and no trade, full for the duration of his contract, and that this is where he wants to be. So I think Chris Drury and company come through last year, the last off season with Jacob Trouba, which is really what it was. It was in the summer when it started, and then the early stages of last season, and the awkwardness and how much it seemed to impact, fracture the locker room, or create a distance and a separation between players and coaching staff. Certainly, players in front office. I don't think they want a repeat of that. So I actually credit the front office and Mike Sullivan specifically. Once he was hired, it's like, okay, Meek is going to be here because there's not much we can do about it. So let's roll our sleeves up and figure out how to get him back to where we feel he should be. Whether or not it works out, now that we're going to play games down, remains to be seen. But I do at least like the idea that they try to bring that relationship back to a better place. Certainly new head coach helps. He goes out to Sweden, he spends time with them. Hey, how can we help you, help yourself, and help the team and all that. And I do like the fact that it sounds like, at least at the start, he's going to continue to play with JT Miller on the wing. Once Miller came in last year, we saw a little bit more of the version of Zibanejad we've seen in prior seasons. How much does he have left in the tank? I don't know for sure, but I think if you're asking him to play wing more regularly rather than the responsibilities and the grind and the gruel of playing center, two ways, back and forth, face off, defensive zone coverages, I do think we could get a better version of him this year than we saw last year. Enough to send them to the Stanley Cup final? Probably not, but the reality is they're locked into some of these aging contracts right now. So to me, you might as well do what you can to get yourself back into the playoffs. Take your shot. You've got the big time goalie. He signed long term. So while the window may be closing, this is still a team that's in a win now mode.
So we talk about the coaching staff. Mike Sullivan is here, came from the Pittsburgh Penguins. We saw what he did with Sidney Crosby and just all that talent over there with Malkin and everybody. How does he come to the New York Rangers and get the bet? Like, are we looking at a team that's going to be thriving on offense, or we're going to be looking more a defensive heavy team? Explain to me what you think what type of production we're going to get from our offensive skill players.
Well, I think they need to certainly be more consistent offensively. And at times last year, I think because of all the running around and lack of structure that there was in the defensive zone, I think there was a trickle down effect to what they were doing offensively, both from time spent in their own end, time without the puck. And then I think just being so focused on figuring out how can we tie up some of these loose ends that, you weren't seeing the consistent offense on the other end of the ice, certainly at 5-on-5. But the big difference last year as compared to the year before was the power play going off a cliff. So I'm not to say Mike Sullivan's a power play specialist. The other members of the coaching staff, I think David Quinn actually is going to be the one in charge of and running the power play now that he's back as an assistant. But it's a couple of things. It's one, I think there needs to be more consistency and confidence as they roll through their lines. It can't be so top heavy. The Trocheck, Panarin, Lafreniere line was huge for them 2 years ago. They took a step back last year. So I think it's more about up and down the lineup, new head coach, putting in structure, explaining to these guys what he's going to demand and what he expects from them from an effort and a system and positional standpoint on a night in, night out basis. I like the fact that they're going to play more of a hybrid coverage in their own end, whereas that man-to-man system that they were running under Peter Laviolette last year was a disaster. Their personnel was not equipped to handle it, and they never changed or deviated from it. So I expect to see a team that looks like they've got a little bit more of a clue and a feel and a capability to do what they're being asked to in their own end. And I think that will translate to some more offense on the other end. 5-on-5 has been a bugaboo for them. We know that. They've been power play dependent. So they've got to be better at 5-on-5. And if they can get their power play back to being a little bit closer to where it was 2 years ago, maybe not tops in the league, but more production than we saw last year, I think that will make up for some of the things that we saw that caused them issues last year.
CeeLo, we saw last year that before the season got started, there was rumblings about Shesterkin getting an extension. He finally did get his extension, and honestly, it was one of his worst seasons as a New York Ranger. And that was, you could talk about the defense as being, completely putrid, part of it. But on the other hand, too, he's got to make the saves. He's the goalie. He's the guy that is expected to be Henrik Lundqvist, to say the very least, but even better, he's getting paid for it. So now with the defense a little bit more squared up, like you said, the acquisition of Gavrikov, that's going to help on defense and help Fox explode, be more offensive. But is this defense better suited this year to help Lundqvist, to help Shesterkin to, get his his goals against lower, to allow him to be the better Shesterkin we've seen in the past?
I don't know that the personnel is any better because I have question marks about. I mean, look, to me, the top pair is going to be real solid. We already touched on Gavrikov and Fox. I'm a Braden Schneider fan. I hope that they'll give him more responsibility this year than they have in years past. It's a little tricky right now because they're a little bit more set as far as their righty defenseman, which Schneider is, along with Will Borgen. You've got Adam Fox. The left side is where I have question marks. Carson Sousa did not look good once he was brought over in the trade. Vakanainen's okay. So to me, finding the right blend and mix of defense partners after Gavrikov and Fox, if they're going to keep those two together, that's where I think it could have the impact on the goaltending. And that comes back to my point about the system that they're going to play. And that involves the forwards in their own end as well. So I think for Igor, not to make excuses for him, because once you sign the big money contract, which he did, and the extension, which is kicking in this year, the expectations go through the roof. And it can't just be, well, they're not providing any help in front of him. But sometimes your goalie is there to bail out your defense when things go wrong. And there were times last season where I felt, when they needed a big save, he wasn't coming through with that. So I don't know if that was lack of confidence or feeling like he had to do too much because of the struggles that they were having in front of them, whether it was in their own end, the odd man rushes they were giving up, the way in which they defended those odd man rushes, teams entering their zone on the rush, 3-on-2, even strength, 2-on-2, 3-on-3. They did a poor job of defending, and it led to just too many high danger, high quality chances against. But when push comes to shove, when the goaltender's getting paid as much as he is, and he's now the highest paid goaltender in the league, if you're going to make that move and he's going to accept that deal, no team friendly discount or anything like that, he's got to come through and be that backbone. Whether or not he's going to do that this year, I really don't know what to expect, but I do expect a little bit better version of the defense, the system, and the way they play in front of him this year. New coaching staff, new system, new approach, new strategy as compared to last year. But they got to go out and do that now. We're going to start to find out tonight, and that's the exciting thing about the preseason being over. But I do think there'll be some early growing pains. I don't know that we're going to see this team hit its stride right out of the gate.
Did you like that they signed Shesterkin to the extension? Because it reminds me of the Carey Price extension and the record-setting contract with him, and that backfired. And I feel like a lot of times you see these goalies get these big contracts, and that's where their money is invested in, and it doesn't hit as well as you'd like it to.
I didn't necessarily love it. It's nothing against Igor, but for all the points that you just made and sort of just the philosophy behind team building and where your money's tied up, I have some concerns about that. And in the short term, it's definitely hampering and limiting their ability to improve at other spots. Of course, the thing we have to keep in mind is with the cap number going up each year, that AAV he's making now isn't going to seem as astronomical a couple years down the road unless something drastic happens. I'm not saying, the next goalie that's going to sign, big name goalie, is going to be making more than him, but the percentage of the cap that his contract is taking up is going to come down in these next few years as the cap continues to rise. So I think it's a combination of things. We already talked about some of the contracts they are tied up and locked into long term. The other thing, though, is, if they didn't, where were they turning for the next guy? Jonathan Quick is serving his purpose as the backup right now. He's got 1 year left, maybe. They don't really have a blue chip goalie prospect in their system coming up right now. It's tough to go out on the open market and find those guys. And if you've got a really good goaltender and you're looking at, off him in a trade, what's the return? If the Rangers were going to go acquire a true starting caliber goaltender to pay less money to, what would they have to give up in a trade when they've already parted with a lot of assets and prior trades that they've made? So I think their hand was forced a little bit. Maybe it would have been nice to see it maybe not be quite as much money as he signed for. We saw Connor McDavid give the Oilers a bit of a team-friendly discount, albeit on a short-term contract extension, only 2 years, as compared to Igor locking in long-term. But they've made their bed with him, and now they got to lie in it. He's got to lie in it, so they've got to do their best to put forth a better outfit in front of him, both defensively and then with what they're offering with their forward units.
A couple more off the ice questions, as you mentioned there were some transactions the Rangers made last year. We know about the Kreider stuff during the offseason, but during the season last year, they did get rid of Capo Caco, who seemed to click as soon as he got on a new team. Disappointing. Now you see Lafreniere, who's now, what is this, his fourth year with the team? I think it's time.
I think it might be 5, actually.
Right. But he's still so young, and you expect, if he doesn't start to click this year, do we expect them to move on from him too?
They could, in that even though he signed his extension, he really doesn't have the same type of, clause protection that other guys do. His name was kind of rumored about in the offseason if they were really going to make some sort of blue chip acquisition via a trade, possibly moving on from him or flipping one young player for another young player and giving each a fresh start. The kid from Buffalo, whose name is escaping, JJ Paterka. There was a lot of rumors about that as a potential swap there in the offseason. Look, as far as Lafreniere goes, it's I think it's frustrating at times because of where he was drafted, obviously, and the same was true for Kako. You're looking for a little bit more bang for your buck and from where you drafted him, but also his 5-on-5 numbers, production, underlying numbers have been mostly solid. Now, I think part of that we have to acknowledge is the guys that he plays with regularly in Vincent Trocheck and Artemi Panarin, and that line obviously clicked quite a bit 2 years ago, and they were one of the top three-man line units in the NHL. We got away from that a little bit last year, but a lot of guys that are big-time offensive players and put up big numbers get a lot of power play time. And that's been a thing that has been a consistent talking point with the Rangers, the fact that they don't give him much time on the power play. They were so heavy with their first unit. He was on the second unit, but didn't see the ice power play wise much. Maybe that changes under Mike Sullivan. They've talked a little bit about it here in the preseason, but their first unit is pretty set. And those guys usually get the bulk of the playing time. They certainly did under Peter Laviolette. So if you're looking for a jump in production from Loft this year, I think some of that's going to have to come from a little bit more time with the man advantage. 5-on-5, is he the best player in the league? No, but I think he's been solid and dependable when he's given the opportunity and the ice time. I would expect that to continue.
Now, who do you think is going to really step up this year? Obviously, Matt Rempe's now. He's been in the league a little bit. I don't think we expect him to be a high-end goal scorer, but we expect him maybe to see more playing time. He's trying to be a little bit more well-rounded. Trocheck last year had a bad season. It was not what he had the year before.
No, no.
He was incredible goal-wise, everything. He was never that top-end goal scorer, but last year we really missed out on him. But who do you think is going to step up in a way that we haven't seen yet on this team?
Well, I like the strides Will Cooley's made his first couple of years in the league. He's really come on and turned into, we talk about parting ways with Chris Kreider, and I'm not saying Will Cooley is that yet, but similar mold in terms of, straight ahead, power forward. Cooley doesn't have the skating ability that Kreider did, but, not afraid to go in and throw his weight around, up there leading among the league leaders in checks. I think he's going to get more of an opportunity to play in the top six this season, whereas he was more of a, bottom six role player these last couple of years. So you're looking for him to take that next step forward now that he's into his second contract, a bridge contract. And, the Rangers need some of their younger homegrown forward guys to develop and produce a little bit more. And they've been really top heavy as far as their skill position players and their guys that are ultra productive are acquired from outside the organization, either through trade or free agency. I'm very excited, and I hope he's in the lineup tonight. I know we made the opening roster. I want to see Noah Laba, the rookie who won a job through training camp and has sort of been a under the radar prospect because he was taken in the fourth round a few years back. Got a little bit of a taste at Hartford late last season after his college season ended, and looked the part in the preseason to the point where we've had these questions about, okay, well, if Zibanejad's going to play wing with JT Miller, you've got Trocheck centering the other line. Who's going to play third line center? They acquired Juuso Parssinen mid-season last year and wasn't all that impressive. They gave him a 2-year extension in the offseason at a pretty low dollar amount, but it was sort of like, all right, this is going to be the guy that they're going to roll with and give a shot. And I think they liked enough what they saw from Noah Laba in the preseason that he's going to get an opportunity here out of the gate. Not Brett Berard and not Gabe Perreault and not Brennan Othman. So these more upper echelon guys, prospects that they drafted in higher rounds. And here's Noah Laba because of his ability to play center. The Rangers system is barren as far as center prospects are concerned. So this guy gets a shot, and I'm very curious, and we'll be watching closely how he handles his initial foray into the NHL here out of the gate.
And listen, 2 years ago, they were in the Eastern Conference Finals, and last year they didn't make the playoffs. So I think there's somewhere in between that maybe this team sits.
Yes.
Where's your prediction as where the New York Rangers are going to land come the end of the season?
My expectation, whether you think it's not you, but other people that follow the team think it's fair or realistic or not, is as currently constructed, the amount of money they're spending on certain players, they should be a playoff team. They belong in the playoffs. They've got the big time goaltender. They've got a top defense pairing. Question marks after that. They have some legit scoring as far as their top six is concerned. So New head coach, a guy that has a proven track record, and you could say, well, look at the talent he won with in Pittsburgh, and it's a lot of years ago now. There's a reason he's also going to be coaching the United States in the Olympics and coached them in 4 Nations last year. He has a good reputation. I think he's built a good staff. So I think the Rangers have solidified some of the questions and the things that hampered them last year. You look around the Eastern Conference, there's some good teams, but the amount of injuries that the Panthers are already dealing with, both with Matthew Tkachuk, Barkov being down for the year, they got a couple other guys that are banged up already. I understand they're a team that you kind of wait till the springtime and then all of a sudden they come on strong. But as far as the regular season goes, even within their own division, Hurricanes are always tough, but the Rangers, seem to hang in there with them. Certainly come playoff time, they've won a couple of playoff series against them. So I think they'll be in the playoffs. I would expect them to at least be able to win a round. Of course, here we are in early October. That's pending injuries and matchups and all that. But at the outset of the season, playoff team, I think it's a failure if they don't at least advance to the second round of the playoffs, whichever bracket they end up in. Conference final, hard for me to say at this point, depending on matchups. But we talked at the beginning of this little spot here that, the window is starting to close. The time is now as far as some of these players that are getting a little bit longer in the tooth. So I'm looking for them to try to capitalize and take advantage of that and find their way back into the postseason and then make a little bit of a run.
Yeah, I hate to say that because the Panthers are so injured right now that maybe there is an opportunity, but you never know. That's how the game works. One last question, because there were rumors of maybe the Hughes brothers finding their way to the Rangers. That clearly is probably not going to happen now with Luke Hughes signing a big deal with the Devils. His brother Jack's already there. So now it's just, hey, get Quinn from Vancouver and you get the brothers there in New Jersey. But are the Rangers looking to do one big splash move in the near future to kind of get that level of talent here?
Well, they were definitely, I think, kind of taking a wait and see approach as far as guys that could have potentially come available next summer. And so after this season, next offseason, Connor McDavid certainly was the top of everyone's list. Should that have happened? That's off. That's not going to happen now. Kirill Kaprizov, they thought maybe, well, he and Artemi Panarin have a relationship. Maybe that's off the table now that he signed this monster extension, the likes of which we haven't seen. And the other name that they've always sort of been lusting after was Jack Eichel. And from everything I read and gather, it sounds like it's a matter of when, not if, he re-ups in Las Vegas with the Golden Knights. Sounds like that relationship is strong. He wants to be there. Mitch Marner's there now, obviously. So I think it was just like, let's keep our options available if one of these big fish becomes available on the open market next summer. But I think those options are going to dry up quickly. So then you circle back to, what are they going to do about Artemi Panarin, who's entering his walk year, and questions about him getting up there in age, the off-ice stuff that went on with Madison Square Garden last year, the fact that he didn't play, to me, the fact that he didn't play in the preseason at all and had a couple of different injuries, but now is ready to go for. I just feel like there might be some stuff going on behind the scenes as far as his status is concerned. So very curious to see what kind of season he has. That's their next big decision. And even if they do bring him back, I would think at his age and just the way the market shakes, I would think his AAV would be significantly less than the contract they gave him to bring him here as a free agent, which I think was like 11.6 million per season, something like that. If they choose to move on from him, that frees up a big number that they can then go and reinvest elsewhere next summer, whether it be acquiring someone in a trade and extending them or taking a run at somebody in free agency. But we're a ways off from figuring out who's actually going to be available come next July.
Well, listen, let's just hope that the season kicks off well. Last year it did, and then they fell flat after the first very quickly. But let's hope it changes. Let's get back into the playoffs. Chris, it was awesome. We'll definitely check in again during the season. Have you on again. Chris Lopresti, everybody. Thank you again for joining us, bud.
Thanks, Hoff. Appreciate it.
All right, catch you later, man.